The thunder outside matched the storm brewing in my kitchen at 2:17 in the morning. I sat there in the dark, nursing my third cup of coffee and watching raindrops race down the window like tears I refused to shed. Vanessa's Mercedes wasn't in the driveway. Again. My name's Jack Landry, and I'm about to tell you how I discovered that my wife of 20 years had been stealing our daughter's college fund to bankroll her affair with a smooth-talking real estate weasel named Eric Shaw. But more importantly, I'm going to tell you exactly how I made them both pay for it. The garage door rumbled open at 2:32. I'd been counting the minutes, the way you count down to an execution. Vanessa's heels clicked across the hardwood like a countdown timer, each step bringing her closer to the reckoning she didn't know was coming. She walked into the kitchen, still perfect despite the late hour. Vanessa always looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Blonde hair in place, makeup flawless, designer clothes that cost more than most people's rent. Even her lies were perfectly manicured. "Jack, what are you doing up?" Her voice carried that practiced concern she used with clients, the kind that sounded caring but felt cold as winter rain. "Waiting for you." I didn't turn around. "We need to talk." She set her purse down with deliberate care, the way she did everything. "Can't it wait until morning? I'm exhausted." "I bet you are." I finally turned to face her, and something in my expression made her take a step back. "Balancing books all night is hard work, isn't it, Vanessa? Especially when you're not balancing them at the office." Her face went through a series of micro-expressions, confusion, calculation, then that familiar mask of innocent indignation. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood up slowly, savoring the moment. For 20 years, I'd been the blue-collar husband, married up, the mechanical engineer who fixed things while she managed money and social climbing. Tonight, the tables were turning. "It means I know about the $60,000 missing from Emily's college fund." I watched her face go pale beneath her foundation. "It means I know about ES Realty LLC, and it means I know exactly where you've been spending your evenings." Vanessa's composure cracked just enough to let the real woman underneath peek through. "Jack, I can explain. Can you explain this?" I slid the 529 plan statement across the kitchen island. The numbers told the whole story. Systematic withdrawals over 6 months, each one authorized by her signature. Or maybe you can explain why Eric Shaw's new downtown condo has your name on the deed as a cosigner? She stared at the papers like they might burst into flames. When she looked up, the mask was gone entirely. This was the real Vanessa, calculating, cold, and caught. "That money was just sitting there," she said, her voice taking on that entitled edge I'd grown to hate. "Emily's got 2 more years before she needs it. I was investing it, making it grow." "Into Eric Shaw's real estate empire?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's what you call screwing your way through my daughter's future, an investment?" "Don't be crude, Jack. You wouldn't understand the complexities." "Oh, I understand perfectly." I reached into her purse and pulled out the burner phone I'd found earlier that evening. Her eyes went wide. "I understand that you've been texting your boyfriend about dead capital and how stupid your husband is for not seeing the potential." The phone buzzed in my hand. A new message from Eric. "Can't wait to celebrate our new place tomorrow night. Your husband will never know what hit him." I held up the screen so she could see it. "Dead capital, Vanessa? Is that what you called our marriage, our daughter's future?" For the first time in years, Vanessa looked genuinely afraid. "Jack, please, let me explain. It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think." I dropped the phone on the floor and brought my boot down hard. The screen exploded in a shower of glass and plastic. "You stole from our daughter to finance your affair. You signed legal documents behind my back. You turned my life into a joke and shared the punchline with your boyfriend." Thunder crashed overhead, and in the flash of lightning that followed, I saw something in Vanessa's eyes I'd never seen before, the dawning realization that she'd pushed the wrong man too far. "The money's not gone, Jack. I can get it back. We can fix this." "We." I stepped closer and she backed against the counter. "There is no we anymore, Vanessa. You made sure of that when you decided my family's future was dead capital." I grabbed my jacket from the chair and headed for the door. Behind me, I heard her calling my name, but her voice was already fading into the storm. I had work to do. As I drove through the rain toward Pete's house, I couldn't stop thinking about that phrase, dead capital. Money that wasn't being used to its full potential, Well, Vanessa was about to learn that her husband wasn't dead capital either. I was an investment that was about to pay dividends she never saw coming. Pete Kowalski lived in a double-wide trailer that looked like it had survived 3 hurricanes and a tornado, but he kept the best beer in Bracton and never asked stupid questions, which made him perfect for what I had in mind. "You look like hell warmed over," Pete said, opening the door in his boxers and a Red Sox t-shirt. "What time is it?" "Time to stop being the nice guy." I pushed past him into his living room, which was decorated in early American bachelor, pizza boxes, empty beer bottles, and a 60-inch TV that dominated the space like a shrine to sports. Pete grabbed 2 beers from his refrigerator and handed me one. "Vanessa finally push you over the edge?" "She stole Emily's college fund to buy her boyfriend a condo." I took a long pull from the beer and felt some of the rage settle into something colder, more focused. $60,000, Pete. Gone. "Jesus," Pete whistled low. "What are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to make them both wish they'd never met." I looked at my oldest friend, the guy who'd had my back since high school shop class. "You still got that drone you bought last Christmas?" Pete's eyes lit up with the kind of unholy glee that had gotten us both detention more times than I could count. "Now you're talking my language." We spent the next hour planning. Pete's drone was a high-end model he'd bought during his brief midlife crisis phase, complete with a camera that could record in 4K. More importantly, it was quiet and nearly invisible at night. "Eric Shaw works out at that fancy gym downtown every morning at 6, I told Pete. "Drives a silver BMW, parks in the same spot every day like clockwork. And you know this, how? Because I've been watching him for 3 days. I pulled out my phone and showed Pete the photos I'd taken. Eric Shaw in all his glory. Perfectly styled hair, expensive workout clothes, and that smug smile that said he'd never faced a real consequence in his life. "Pretty boy," Pete observed. "I bet he's never been in a real fight. He's about to be in one he can't win." I finished my beer and stood up. "But first, we're going to have some fun." The next morning, Pete and I were parked across from Pinnacle Fitness at 5:45, watching Eric's BMW pull into its usual spot. He climbed out looking like a Men's Health magazine cover, all perfect teeth and confidence. "Guy's got no idea what's coming," Pete muttered, adjusting the drone's camera. "That's what makes this so beautiful." We waited until Eric disappeared inside, then Pete launched the drone. It was a thing of beauty. Watching that little machine hover over Eric's precious BMW like a mechanical angel of vengeance. The camera captured everything in perfect detail. The license plate, the interior, even the little air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror. But the real fun started when Eric came back outside an hour later. He stopped dead when he saw his car. Someone, and I'm not saying who, had covered every inch of his BMW in plastic wrap. Not just any plastic wrap, but the industrial strength stuff Pete used to winterize his boat. It was wrapped so tight and so many times that the car looked like a silver cocoon. Eric stood there for a full minute, his mouth hanging open like a landed fish. Then he started pulling at the plastic, but it was wound too tight and too thick. Every time he thought he'd made progress, another layer appeared underneath. "This is better than cable," Pete whispered, recording every second. It took Eric 45 minutes and a borrowed box cutter from the gym to free his car. By then, a small crowd had gathered, and everyone was filming with their phones. Eric's face was red with exertion and embarrassment, his perfect hair plastered to his head with sweat, but we were just getting started. That afternoon, I put on my old delivery uniform for my college job and walked into Shaw & Associates Real Estate like I owned the place. The receptionist, a young woman with too much makeup and not enough sense, barely looked up from her phone. "Delivery for Eric Shaw," I announced, holding up a large box wrapped in brown paper. "He's in his office," she said, pointing down the hall. "Third door on the right." Eric's office was exactly what I'd expected, all glass and chrome, with motivational posters that probably cost more than most people's furniture. Eric himself was on the phone, gesturing wildly as he talked about synergistic opportunities and market penetration. I set the box on his desk and left without a word. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in my truck across the street when the screaming started. The box had contained 5 pounds of fresh fish guts, courtesy of Pete's weekend fishing trips. In the summer heat, sealed in a box for 3 hours, it had reached a level of putrefaction that would make a garbage truck driver gag. People started pouring out of the building like it was on fire. Eric stumbled out last, retching into a trash can while his expensive suit absorbed the lingering aroma of rotted fish. The building had to be evacuated. The hazmat team that came to clean up Eric's office charged $3,000. And according to the local news report that evening, Shaw and Associates would be operating out of a temporary location for at least a week. "You're enjoying this way too much," Pete said that night as we watched the news coverage. "I'm just getting started." I raised my beer in a mock toast. "Here's to dead capital, Pete. May it rest in pieces." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop now or you'll regret it. You don't know who you're dealing with." I showed it to Pete, who just laughed. "Looks like you got their attention," he said. I typed back a simple response. "You're right. I don't know who I'm dealing with, but you're about to find out exactly who you're dealing with." Then I turned off my phone and started planning phase 2. The next morning brought news that made my coffee taste like victory. Vanessa had called in sick to work, the first time in 15 years. When someone who lives for appearances suddenly can't face the world, you know you've drawn blood. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Emily called while I was eating breakfast alone in our too-quiet kitchen. My daughter's voice was tight with worry, the way it got when she was trying not to cry. "Dad, something's wrong with my tuition account. The bursar's office says there's not enough money for next semester." "I know, sweetheart. Your mother and I are handling it." "But how did this happen? Mom said the account was fine last month." I closed my eyes and counted to 10. Emily didn't need to know the whole truth, not yet. She was 19 years old and supposed to be worried about finals and boys, not her mother's betrayal. "There was an unauthorized withdrawal. We're going to get it back." "Unauthorized? You mean someone stole it?" "Something like that." The lie tasted bitter but necessary. "Don't worry about it, Em. I promise I'll fix this." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and let the rage build again. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about Emily's voice. Scared and confused because her mother had decided their daughter's future was acceptable collateral damage for an affair. Time to escalate. I drove to Bracton Community College, where I'd taken night classes years ago to get my engineering degree. The financial aid office was run by Mrs. Patterson, a woman who remembered every student and never forgot a favor. "Jack Landry," she beamed when I walked in. "How's that beautiful daughter of yours?" "That's actually why I'm here, Mrs. Patterson. I need some advice about 529 education savings plans." 20 minutes later, I walked out with everything I needed to know about reporting misuse of educational funds. Turns out, when someone uses a 529 plan for non-educational expenses, there are penalties, taxes, and, most importantly, mandatory reporting requirements that trigger automatic investigations. I spent the afternoon at the library, researching and making phone calls. By evening, I had filed complaints with the IRS, the State Attorney General's office, and Emily's college financial aid department. Each complaint was meticulously documented, with copies of the 529 statements, the property records showing Eric's condo purchase, and the timeline of withdrawals. The beauty of it was that I didn't have to prove anything criminal. I just had to point out the discrepancies and let the bureaucracy do what bureaucracy does best: investigate everything with the enthusiasm of a pack of bloodhounds. But the real masterpiece was yet to come. Saturday morning was the annual Bracton Summer Festival, a small-town tradition that brought everyone out to the park for a 5K run, food trucks, and enough gossip to fuel the town until Christmas. Eric Shaw was registered for the run. I checked the participant list online. Pete and I positioned ourselves along the route, right at the 2-mile mark where the path curved around Miller's Pond. Eric appeared right on schedule, looking like he'd stepped out of a running magazine in his expensive gear and wireless headphones. I waited until he was 20 feet away, then stepped onto the path like I was joining the run. Eric saw me at the last second, his eyes going wide with recognition and something that might have been fear. "Morning, Eric," I said conversationally, matching his pace. "Beautiful day for a run." He tried to speed up, but I stayed right beside him. Other runners were passing us, but they were focused on their own time, their own goals. "Stay away from me," Eric panted. "I'll call the police." "And tell them what? That I'm exercising in a public park?" I laughed. "By all means, call them. I've got some interesting things to discuss with the police about you and my wife." We were approaching the pond now, where the path narrowed and curved sharply to the left. Perfect. You know what I love about running, Eric? It's all about momentum. Once you're moving in one direction, it's really hard to change course. I waited until we hit the curve, then threw out my arm like I was checking my watch. Eric, trying to avoid contact, veered sharply to the right, straight into the soft mud at the pond's edge. He went down hard, sliding face first into the muck with a splash that sent a family of ducks into panicked flight. When he came up, he was covered head to toe in pond slime that smelled like dead fish and duck droppings. The crowd that had gathered to cheer on the runners burst into laughter. Someone started filming with their phone. Eric struggled to his feet, slipping and sliding in the mud, his expensive running gear now a brown, stinking mess. I knelt down beside the pond like I was helping him up, but instead I whispered in his ear, "That's just the appetizer, Eric. The main course is coming soon." Then I stood up and addressed the crowd. "Careful, everyone. The path's pretty slippery here. Wouldn't want anyone else to take an unexpected swim." More laughter. Eric stumbled away from the pond, leaving a trail of muddy water and wounded pride. The video would be on social media within the hour. But the best part came that evening. I was home, enjoying a beer and scrolling through Facebook posts of Eric's mud bath, when my phone rang. Vanessa's name appeared on the screen. "Jack, please, we need to talk." "I'm listening." The college called, and the state attorney general's office. "They're investigating the 5 and 29 account." "Are they? How interesting." "You did this?" Her voice was shaking. "You reported me. I reported the unauthorized use of educational funds. The law requires it when there are discrepancies." "Jack, please, I can fix this. I can put the money back." "With what money, Vanessa? You spent it all on your boyfriend's real estate dreams." Silence on the other end, then. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand what dead capital really means." I took a sip of my beer, savoring the moment. It means assets that aren't producing value, like a 20-year marriage, like a wife who steals from her own daughter, like a future that's already been sold to the highest bidder. I never meant for it to go this far, but it did go this far, and now you get to live with the consequences. I hung up and turned off my phone. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities for justice. Tonight I was going to enjoy watching Eric's pond dive on YouTube. Pete had uploaded it with the title, "Local Real Estate Agent Takes the Plunge." It already had 300 views and climbing. Dead capital, indeed. Monday morning brought the kind of panic I'd been hoping for. Vanessa left the house at 6 a.m., an hour earlier than usual, and her phone was buzzing constantly with calls she wasn't answering. Through the kitchen window, I watched her fumble with her keys, drop her coffee, and nearly back into Mrs. Hopkins's mailbox. Fear looked good on her. I gave her a 10-minute head start, then followed. Pete met me at the corner in his pickup truck, grinning like we were heading to a football game instead of stalking my cheating wife and her boyfriend. "She's moving like her A is on fire," Pete observed as we watched Vanessa's Mercedes weave through downtown traffic. "The state investigation moves fast when there's clear evidence of fund misuse." I kept my eyes on her car. "She's probably trying to liquidate assets to put the money back before they freeze everything." "Can she do that?" "Not anymore." I pulled out my phone and showed Pete the banking app. "I changed all our passwords yesterday and moved our joint accounts into my name only. Legal separation gives me that right." Pete whistled. "You've been busy. 20 years of marriage teaches you where all the financial bodies are buried." We followed Vanessa to Shaw and Associates' temporary office, set up in a strip mall between a nail salon and a Chinese restaurant. The smell of fish sauce and nail polish remover seemed appropriate for Eric's reduced circumstances. Through the window, we could see Vanessa and Eric in heated discussion. Even from the parking lot, their body language screamed desperation. Eric was gesturing wildly. Vanessa was shaking her head, and both of them looked like they hadn't slept. "Trouble in paradise," Pete murmured. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet us at the Riverside Diner at noon. We can work this out." I showed it to Pete. "Looks like they want to negotiate. You going?" "Hell yes. I wouldn't miss this for the world." The Riverside Diner was the kind of place where truckers and shift workers grabbed coffee and gossip in equal measure. Neutral ground, public enough to prevent a scene, but private enough for the kind of conversation that ends relationships. Eric and Vanessa were already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth like they were planning a funeral, which, in a way, they were. Eric looked like he'd aged 5 years in a week. His usual perfect appearance was cracked around the edges, wrinkled shirt, unshaven face, and dark circles under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide. Vanessa was holding together better, but I could see the stress in the way she gripped her coffee cup like a lifeline. Jack. Vanessa stood up as I approached, her voice carefully neutral. Thank you for coming. Wouldn't miss it. I slid into the booth across from them, noting how they both leaned away from me like I was radioactive. You two look like you've had a rough few days. Eric cleared his throat. Look, Jack, I know how this looks. Do you? Because it looks like you've been screwing my wife and spending my daughter's college money. But please, enlighten me on how it really looks. We never meant for it to happen, Vanessa said quickly. It just developed, like a disease. I signaled the waitress for coffee. So, what's the offer? What's so important that you dragged me down here? Eric leaned forward, trying to look sincere. We can make this right. I've got properties I can liquidate, investors who... Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop. You think this is about money, isn't it? Vanessa's voice was small, uncertain. The money's gone, Vanessa. The state's going to recover what they can and prosecute where they can't. Emily's college will get their investigation results and make their own decisions. That's out of my hands now. Then, what do you want? Eric's voice cracked slightly. I leaned back and studied them both. Two people who had been so confident, so entitled, now reduced to begging in a truck stop diner. I want you to understand what you've done. Really understand it. I took a sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch. Emily called me crying yesterday because she thinks she might have to drop out of school. My daughter, your daughter, Vanessa, is having panic attacks because her future just disappeared. We can fix that, Eric started. With what money? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your real estate empire is built on borrowed money and stolen funds. The state investigation is going to unravel every deal you've made in the last year. Your business partner is already distancing himself. I checked. Eric went pale. How do you know about Marcus calling your investors? About him moving your shared accounts into his name only? I smiled. Because I called him yesterday and explained the situation. Turns out he's not as loyal as you thought. The color drained from Eric's face completely. Vanessa looked confused, then horrified as understanding dawned. He can't do that, Eric whispered. Actually, he can. Just like I did with our accounts, Vanessa. Funny how quickly people abandon ship when the water starts rising. I stood up and threw a $5 bill on the table. Enjoy your lunch. And Eric, you might want to find a new place to live. Something tells me that condo's going to be changing hands soon. I walked away, leaving them sitting there in stunned silence. Through the diner's window, I could see them starting to argue, their voices rising even though I couldn't hear the words. My phone rang as I reached my truck, unknown number again. This isn't over, Jack. Eric's voice was tight with rage and fear. You can't destroy people's lives like this. I'm not destroying anything, Eric. I'm just letting gravity do its work. I climbed into my truck and started the engine. You two built your house of cards. I just stopped propping it up. We'll fight this. We'll hire lawyers. With what money? I put the truck in gear. Your accounts are frozen, your business is under investigation, and your partner just threw you under the bus. But hey, maybe Vanessa's got some dead capital lying around you haven't stolen yet. I hung up and drove home, watching in my rearview mirror as Eric burst out of the diner, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing frantically at nothing. The trap was closing. All that remained was watching them struggle against the inevitable. The warehouse district at night was the perfect place for endings. Empty buildings, broken streetlights, and the kind of silence that made every footstep echo like a gunshot. I'd chosen the old Murphy Manufacturing building because it had something Eric and Vanessa would understand, a history of broken dreams and failed ambitions. It took surprisingly little effort to get them both there. A text to Eric about a cash buyer, interested in purchasing multiple properties, no questions asked. A call to Vanessa about a settlement meeting with someone who could make the state investigation disappear. Desperation makes people stupid. Pete and I arrived early, setting up in the main warehouse floor. The space was cavernous, filled with the ghosts of better times, rusted machinery, broken windows, and the lingering smell of industrial decay. Pete had brought his portable projector and a laptop, turning one concrete wall into a makeshift screen. You sure about this? Pete asked, testing the equipment. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I checked my phone. 8:30 p.m. They'd be arriving soon. Eric showed up first, his BMW looking absurdly out of place among the weeds and broken glass. He climbed out cautiously, looking around like he expected an ambush, which, in a way, he should have. Vanessa arrived 5 minutes later, her Mercedes equally inappropriate for the setting. She parked next to Eric's car and they approached the building together, their voices carrying in the still air. I don't like this, Eric. Something feels wrong. We don't have a choice. If this guy can really make the investigation go away. They pushed through the unlocked door and stepped into the warehouse. I waited until they were both inside. Then Pete hit the lights. Industrial floods that turned the space into a stark, unforgiving stage. Welcome to your reckoning, I called out, stepping into the light. They froze like deer in headlights, their faces cycling through confusion, fear, and finally understanding. Jack, what is this? Vanessa's voice echoed in the empty space. This is where we settle accounts. I gestured to 2 folding chairs Pete had set up in the center of the floor. Have a seat, both of you. We're leaving. Eric grabbed Vanessa's arm and turned toward the door. No, you're not. Pete stepped out of the shadows, blocking their exit. He wasn't threatening, just present. But Pete was built like a linebacker and had the kind of face that suggested he'd been in his share of fights. This is kidnapping, Eric said, his voice cracking. This is a conversation. I pulled out my phone and showed them the screen, the kind that gets recorded for posterity. They sat down, finally understanding they had no choice. In the harsh light, they looked smaller somehow, diminished. Let's start with the presentation, I said, nodding to Pete. The projector hummed to life, filling the wall with images, bank statements showing the systematic withdrawal of Emily's college fund, property records for Eric's condo, text messages between Eric and Vanessa, including several that made Vanessa wince and Eric look sick. This is illegal, Vanessa protested. You can't use private communications. Actually, I can, especially when they document the theft of my daughter's education fund. I advanced to the next slide, a photo of Emily crying on her dorm room bed, taken from her own social media. This is what your investment bought, Vanessa. Your daughter's future, sold for a downtown condo and a few months of excitement. We were going to pay it back, Eric said weakly. Were you? With what money? The next slide showed Eric's business accounts, all frozen by the state investigation. Your real estate empire was built on other people's money, Eric. Investors who trusted you, clients who believed your promises, and a college fund that belonged to a 19-year-old girl who never did anything to hurt you. I clicked to the final slide, a live video feed from Eric's business partner, Marcus, sitting in what used to be Eric's office. Hello, Eric, Marcus said from the screen. His voice was cold, professional. I wanted you to hear this directly. Shaw and Associates is being dissolved. The state investigation found irregularities in 17 different transactions. Our insurance company is refusing to cover any claims related to your personal activities. Eric made a sound like a wounded animal. Marcus continued, Your assets are being liquidated to cover our legal exposure. The condo will be sold to pay back the investors you defrauded. And Eric, don't ever contact me again. The feed cut out, leaving us in silence, broken only by Eric's ragged breathing. That was live, I said conversationally. Happening right now while you're sitting here. Your life's work, dissolving in real time. You fool, Eric whispered. You destroyed everything. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped pretending your house of cards was a real building. I turned to Vanessa. Your turn. I pulled out a manila envelope and scattered its contents on the floor between us. Divorce papers, already filed. Asset division documents that left Vanessa with exactly half of our legitimate assets, and full responsibility for half of the debts created by her theft. The house will be sold to cover Emily's college costs, I explained. Your car, your jewelry, your designer clothes, all of it goes to paying back what you stole. The state will take their penalties and taxes from whatever's left. Vanessa stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. Jack, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. Counseling? I laughed, and the sound echoed off the concrete walls. You want to go to counseling with the woman who stole our daughter's future to buy her boyfriend a love nest? I knelt down in front of their chairs, close enough to see the fear in their eyes. Here's what's going to happen. Eric, you're going to disappear. Leave town, change your name, whatever. But if I ever see you near my family again, I'll make tonight look like a friendly conversation. Eric nodded frantically. And Vanessa, I stood up, looking down at the woman I'd loved for 20 years. You're going to sign those papers. You're going to take responsibility for your choices, and you're going to live with the consequences. What if I refuse? She asked, but there was no fight left in her voice. Then the video of this conversation gets uploaded to YouTube, along with all those text messages and financial records. Your friends, your family, your coworkers, everyone gets to see exactly what kind of person you really are. I gestured to Pete, who produced a pen and clipboard. Sign the papers, Vanessa. End this with whatever dignity you have left. She took the pen with shaking hands and signed her name on every page. Each signature was another nail in the coffin of our marriage, another step toward the justice Emily deserved. When she finished, I collected the papers and nodded to Pete. We're done here. Eric and Vanessa sat in their chairs like broken dolls as Pete and I packed up our equipment. They didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the floor where the scattered remains of their schemes lay in black and white. The door's unlocked, I called over my shoulder as we left. You can leave whenever you're ready, or stay here all night. I don't really care anymore. Outside, Pete clapped me on the shoulder. Feel better? I looked back at the warehouse, where two people were learning what it meant to face consequences for the first time in their lives. Getting there, I said, but I'm not finished yet. Tomorrow would bring the final act. Tonight, I was going to go home and call my daughter to tell her that her college fund would be restored, her future was secure, and sometimes, just sometimes, justice actually wins. Friday night at the Rusty Nail was sacred in Bracton. It was where deals were made, gossip was traded, and reputations were built or destroyed over cheap beer and overpriced wings. The perfect place for a public execution. I walked in at exactly 9 p.m. when the after-work crowd had settled in and the weekend warriors were just getting started. The bar was packed, thick with cigarette smoke and the kind of small-town energy that made everything feel like high school with better booze. Vanessa was already there, sitting alone at a corner table like a pariah. Word had gotten around fast. It always did in a town like Bracton. Her friends had abandoned her, her coworkers were avoiding her, and even Mallory, her longtime partner in social climbing, had publicly distanced herself. She looked up when I entered, and I saw something I'd never seen in 20 years of marriage: genuine fear. Not the calculated concern she used to manipulate situations, but raw, animal terror of what was coming next. I walked to the bar and ordered a beer, letting the moment build. Conversations died as people noticed me, then noticed Vanessa, then put two and two together. By the time I had my drink, half the bar was watching us like we were the evening's entertainment. Which, in a way, we were. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced, raising my beer high enough for everyone to see, I'd like to make a toast. The bar went completely quiet. Even the jukebox seemed to lower its volume. To my wife, Vanessa Landry. Some of you know her as the woman who managed your taxes, helped with your financial planning, gave you advice about your kids' college funds. Vanessa started to stand, but I held up my hand and she froze. What you might not know is that she's been stealing from our daughter's education account to finance her affair with Eric Shaw. $60,000 gone. Our 19-year-old daughter's future sold to buy her boyfriend a downtown condo. The silence was deafening. I could hear someone's beer glass hit the table too hard, the sound sharp as a gunshot. But here's the beautiful part, I continued, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. The state investigation recovered most of the money. Eric's assets were liquidated to pay back the investors he defrauded. And Vanessa here signed away her rights to everything we built together. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the divorce papers, holding them up like a trophy. So, I want everyone to raise their glasses to dead capital. Money that's not being used to its full potential, like a 20-year marriage, like a mother who steals from her own child, like a future that was never worth the price paid for it. The bar erupted. Not in applause, but in the kind of ugly murmur that meant Vanessa's reputation was being buried in real time. I heard fragments of conversation. Always knew she was cold. Poor Emily. What kind of mother? Vanessa finally found her voice. Jack, please. Please what? I walked over to her table, the crowd parting like I was Moses crossing the Red Sea. Please don't tell everyone what you did. Please pretend it never happened. Please let you slink away quietly. I slammed the divorce papers down on her table, hard enough to make her jump. You wanted a new life, Vanessa. You wanted excitement, adventure, a future that wasn't tied down by a blue-collar husband and small-town responsibilities. Well, congratulations. You got exactly what you asked for. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streams, but I wasn't done. Emily knows everything now. I told her the truth about where her college money went, about why her mother was never home, about what kind of woman puts her own pleasure ahead of her daughter's future. You had no right. I had every right. My voice boomed across the bar. I'm her father. It's my job to protect her from people who would hurt her, even when one of those people is her own mother. The crowd was getting restless now, feeding off the drama. Someone shouted, "Tell her, Jack." Another voice called out, "What about Eric?" I smiled, and it must have been a terrible thing to see because Vanessa actually flinched. Eric Shaw left town yesterday morning, I announced to the room. Drove out of Bracton with everything he owned packed in the back of a rented U-Haul. His business is gone, his reputation is destroyed, and his fancy condo is being sold to pay back the people he swindled. The crowd was loving it now. This was better than cable television, better than any reality show. This was real drama, real consequences, happening right in front of them. But the best part, I continued, my voice dropping to a stage whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. He left her behind. When things got tough, when the consequences started piling up, Eric Shaw ran like the coward he always was. Left Vanessa here to face the music alone. I leaned down close to Vanessa's ear, close enough that only she could hear what came next. He never loved you, Vanessa. You were just convenient. Easy, a bored housewife with access to money and low enough standards to think a small-time real estate agent was worth destroying your family over. She sobbed openly now, her carefully constructed image crumbling in front of half the town. I straightened up and addressed the room one final time. So here's to dead capital, everyone. May it rest in peace, along with everything else that's outlived its usefulness. I raised my beer and drained it in one long pull, then set the empty bottle on Vanessa's table with a sharp crack. The papers are signed, the accounts are settled, and Emily's future is secure. Trip's canceled, Vanessa. So is your future. I turned and walked toward the door, leaving Vanessa sitting alone in a room full of people who would never look at her the same way again. Behind me, I could hear the conversations starting up, the gossip machine spinning into overdrive. By tomorrow morning, everyone in Bracton would know the whole story. At the door, I paused and looked back one last time. Vanessa was still sitting at her table, surrounded by empty chairs and the wreckage of her reputation. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her choices. For a moment, just a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered Emily's voice on the phone, scared and confused about her disappeared college fund. I remembered the text messages between Vanessa and Eric laughing about her stupid husband and his dead capital. I remembered 20 years of marriage reduced to a financial transaction in service of a cheap affair. The moment of sympathy passed. I pushed through the door and walked out into the night, leaving behind the woman who had been my wife and the life we'd built together. Behind me, the rusty nail buzzed with the kind of excitement that would fuel Bracton's gossip mill for months to come. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Dad, thank you for fixing everything. I love you." I smiled for the first time in weeks. Real justice wasn't about revenge or punishment or making people suffer. It was about protecting the people you love and making sure the right things survived when everything else fell apart. Emily's future was secure. Her college fund was restored. Her mother's betrayal would heal with time and distance. And her father had proven that sometimes, when you're pushed far enough, the nice guy doesn't have to finish last. I climbed into my truck and drove home through the quiet streets of Bracton, leaving behind the sound of Vanessa's sobs and the satisfied murmur of a crowd that had witnessed real consequences for real actions. Dead capital indeed. Some investments just never pay off.